Now, we've seen a survey this week from Halifax, which talks about the rising demand last year for detached houses. So we've touched on this before, but our housing preferences are changing as a result of the pandemic. People want to live in bigger properties to have more space to work from home, particularly when the kids are at home as well. They want to be in more rural locations, so they're not sort of in the city during lockdown, as it were. So detached houses in the past year have gone up 10%. And that's a much bigger increase than we've seen for terraced homes, for semi-detached houses, for flats, etc. So, what do you make of that?
I feel like I say every single week. I find it unsurprising because I now know personally, it of course will not just be people moving out of bigger cities, but I know personally people that have moved out of London. If you are a homeowner in London, a flat is worth a small fortune. Actually, you can probably buy a detached house in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And it makes sense as well. I think working patterns will change, as we've talked about before, and even if people are not working from home 100% of the time, I think there's a reasonable chance that it's going to be 2 days a week. And if you're in that situation, you of course want the space to do it. Ideally, it would be nice to have an office. It would be nice to, I think being quiet as well is quite key here,
Yes.
because of course, detached houses do offer that more kind of isolated experience, and you're less likely to hear your neighbor's dog barking or the children crying or something like that. And so if you are one of these people that's on Zoom quite a lot or talking to people quite a lot, I guess it's nice not to have to worry about the additional noise. 10% though is a hell of a lot in a year. I think that's actually what surprises me. It's not that people want the detached houses, it's that they're willing to pay that much money for them.
Yeah.
And there's a big jump now if you're a person that maybe owns a flat or a terraced house or something like that. You've now, I think the research said you've got to stump up something like an extra 200,000, or you'd have to borrow that money to live in a detached house, which I imagine will maybe put off younger people because it's a lot of money.
Yeah, I find that particularly interesting in the research, and it's that leap between if you live in a semi-detached house to a detached house, it's an extra £200,000. There was a big leap as well if you wanted to go from flat to terraced house to semi-detached house as well. But and we've experienced this here, and a few points to pick up on there. So you're talking about this sort of movement out of London where people own property and they can sell it, and they can buy a much larger property out in the suburbs somewhere, or out in the surrounding home counties. And we're seeing a big number of people moving from London to down here on the Surrey-Sussex border, because they can pick up a detached house for between 500 and 750, and actually probably bank a bit of profit still after they've sold their 1 or 2 bedroom flat in London, which is just incredible. So that is probably driving house prices. This isn't necessarily people who are moving from within their own area, from semi-detached to detached or terrace to semi-detached. This is probably people moving out of cities and into the countryside. It's not really the countryside, but it sort of is. But the step up as well, I think, is particularly interesting. I may have mentioned this before as well. So we're in a 3-bed. It's not quite detached. It's a linked detached. So we have that slight garage separation between the next door neighbour, which is quite nice. It's not their dog and children making noise. It's our dogs and children making noise. So I feel sorry for them. But the step up from us for going from a 3-bed to a 4-bed in this area is probably in that region of £200,000, and that's a huge step. That's a huge increase to go and borrow that money, to find that money, and then to have the higher mortgage and have the additional monthly payment commitments for the sake of an extra bedroom. So it's tough times if you want to move up the housing ladder.
It is, and I find this is purely an anecdotal
Yeah.
example, but I wonder if it's an age thing, because I mean, obviously, I've lived with either lots of people in the form of uni housemates and then first housemates in London. Now I live with my boyfriend, and we've always lived in flats because obviously we're not going to imagine if we could rent a detached house in London. Imagine how sweet my life would be. God, I'd be loaded. So for me, the idea of living around people is very, very common. And yeah, occasionally you get a bit of noise. The next door neighbours have got 2 very, very young, boisterous boys. So you do kind of hear occasionally kind of a bang and starting crying. But neither of us find that offensive. It's just kind of like, oh, that's happening again.
Yeah.
But my parents, now they are in their 60s, and they've actually very recently bought a house. They haven't moved there yet. They're in the very kind of early stages. But they are obsessed with the idea of having a detached house, and I find it bizarre, because I think to myself, couldn't you buy a really lovely, you know, semi detached house like you've got, or a terrace house or something like that, but they won't deal with it. They cannot stand to have neighbors. And I wonder if it's an age thing. Like
It
that's
is,
all I can
and I
think.
can't wait, Hannah, for another sort of 10, 15 years and you catch up with my age and you're going to feel exactly the same. Whenever we look, Becky and I look at, you know, potential houses, we do the sort of the browsing right move like everyone does. And as soon as she says, well, look at this one. No, neighbours are too close. And it's the biggest consideration. I think it might be the sort of, you know, the Englishman's home is his castle type thing as well. You know, I want my own space and I want my own privacy. The last thing I'd want is to be overlooked, for example, in our garden. We're surrounded by woodland here, so that's quite a nice thing. But then people occasionally walk through the woodland, and I often joke to Becky, "Oh, we should be putting barbed wire out there and stopping them from going through." So, trust me, you will become old and grumpy and miserable at some point. It will happen. It's inevitable.
Oh God.
Sorry to say that.